Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Interesting conversation today. I reach back in my own radio history and have a conversation with my buddy Mike Notrth. Mike and I worked together at the Score radio station for several years, 9 years. That's the time I was at the Score. Mike went on for another 8 years, then had a very successful run at Fox Sports Radio, and very recently has joined the podcasting ranks. So this is a good opportunity to talk about where radio is. And the Score is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year here in Chicago. And we kind of talk about the origins of sports talk radio, modern sports talk radio, because the Score is one of the first stations in the country to go all sports back in 1992. And Mike was one of the very first hosts, and I started producing about 4 months in. And we just talk about the origins of sports talk radio. This year, Mike has joined the podcasting ranks with his own podcast. It's called Sticks and Stones, and it's at podcastarena.com/Mike Notrth, or you can find it at iTunes and all the other podcasting platforms. But Mike does a show. It's very sports-centric, and it's a lot of fun. Of course, Mike understands that this is kind of a nerd culture show. So I get Mike's thoughts on a few nerd culture subjects, from Marvel Westerns to his thoughts on Batman versus Superman. That seems to be kind of the easy touchstone, that movie, and certainly because it's been on HBO's, for the last 2 months, nonstop, gives us the opportunity to talk about that. But Mike is also a huge old-time movie buff, so you get a little scene missing action if you're an old Word Balloon fan. And I took full advantage of the fact that Mike would have interesting observations. And then, again, because of Chicago Sports Radio, Mike and I had an opportunity to meet a lot of celebrities, and we reminisce of some of the good times we had with people like Don Rickles and Mike with Frank Sinatra and a few other big celebrities as well. So it's all true stories and a very interesting conversation. It honestly has a little Bendis tapes in it. But Mike's an old-school guy, and it's fun to have this conversation. Mike Notrth and the history of Chicago Sports Radio, and I'll live my own personal history on today's Word Balloon. It's brought to you by In-Stock Trades at InStockTrades.com. Amazing deals are happening now at In-Stock Trades. Big-ticket items, these are the giant books, are on sale for up to 50% at InStockTrades.com. Things like Absolute Why the Last Man, hardcover volume 2, is just $62.50. You can get other things like the great Golden Age collections, like Forbidden Worlds, hardcover volume 7, great stories from the United States and even the UK from the Golden Age of comics. 45% off, $26.39. Check out that list, and I think you're going to find something. Greg Rucka Batman product is now available at InStockTrades.com. Some great runs are finally making their way back. A great story, Batman Death and the Maidens, featuring Ra's al Ghul and a secret daughter that we never knew about that's become a prominent character in Arrow as well. The origins of that story with Greg Rucka and Klaus Janson. 42% off, $17.39. You can also get Checkmate, and I'm really glad that Checkmate is finally coming out. This is DC's espionage arm of the DC universe, and great stories there, starting with Volume 1 at 42% off, $14.49. You can get Thief of Thieves, Sean Martinborough, and Andy Diggle doing a great job on that wonderful heist book, and from Image that was created by Robert Kirkman, 42% off for Volume 6, $8.69. This is all from InStockTrades.com. Check out the deals for yourself. They're waiting for you now. InStockTrades.com. All right, as we get into our conversation with Mike Notrth, something happened with, every now and then, something happens with Skype, and it gets weird. Near the midway point of this conversation, things got, in the words of Doctor Who, timey-wimey. And I'm not really sure exactly what happened, but we would start to overlap in our conversation. And this just wasn't because it's audio and it's a phone conversation and we both are anxious to talk that we would kind of cut each other off. It literally was to the point where our words were blurring over each other. and we had to worry about it not making sense to play it back. So I've got about an hour of my conversation with Mike. Still very funny, a lot of fun, good nostalgia time for the two of us. I hope you enjoy it too. Here's Mike North on Word Balloon. All right, after many technical difficulties, I'm very happy to welcome my friend. We go back a long, long time. It is hard to believe how many years we have worked together in radio and television, and now, finally, I have Mike North on my Word Balloon podcast. Welcome, my friend.
All you had to do was ask. I'm right here for you, Shake. What's going on, handsome?
How you been?
I've been great. Everything's been good. Doing the things I like to do. Being able to, keep creating like you like to do. We like things that a lot of people don't like, but the niche that we have is great.
This is true.
And I've had a great niche. So you know what? When you're successful, then you can call your own shots, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to do that.
I hear you, man. No, I'm glad you've joined me in the podcast world. You've been podcasting for a little bit over a month, and congratulations, welcome. And you've taken your very large media audience and brought them online with you because you've been kicking ass at Fox and many years at The Score.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have had a good run. I was at The Score for 17. I was at Fox for 6. And then they just walked up to me and Andy Firm and the people at Fox and said, we're going to go in a different direction. We're going to shuffle the deck. Well, we were the only two guys that were shuffled. We were doing tremendously as a show. We had a tremendous following. So then after they just dropped that little bomb on us, about 4 months ago, I decided to take a step back, examine the industry, see where it's going. I see where it's going here in Chicago and in other places, and I'm not liking it. You have TV people now being involved in a lot of areas of radio, where they're merging, and now they're saying, we would rather hear our personalities on your airwaves than the ones that are actually trained to do radio. So you had told me about podcasting way back when, and then David Gow, who's one of the founders, he is the guy at Gow Media, and Jeff Schwartz and other people said, why don't you try this podcasting thing? And I was working as a consultant with them at the time anyway. So I said, okay, I'll try it, and I love it. It's about 35 to 40 minutes a day, Shake, and I call him Shaky, folks. So, I mean, that's just the way. Sorry, I know he's known as John Word Balloon Suntress and everything else, but I think I gave him the name Shaky, and if I didn't, I should have. But he's just great. And then what happened is a lot of our radio people now caught on to the podcast.
Yes.
And I said, what am I doing here? A lot of podcasts split the money 50-50 with you. I told Mr. Gow, and he said, fine, since I'm doing some work for you anyway, you know what? Why don't you keep all the profits on this? Since it's so exuberant, since this podcasting is so exuberant with money, you keep it, and I'll go out and get sponsors. So I went out and got local sponsors who I've been with for 20, 25 years. They backed me from the very beginning. And now I'm trying to change the podcast arena. If you have a name, if you have 205,000 followers like I do on Twitter, then you can. I mean, I have more followers than the paper I work for in Chicago
the Daily Herald.
Subscribers.
Yeah, I'll say it, the Daily Herald. All right, yeah, man, that's very impressive. And yes, you do. You have a large social media presence, which does make it easier to get a successful podcast, and good for you, man, in terms of getting the local advertising.
Well, you know what, Jake? If somebody wants to advertise, you can go through a radio station, and you might get a show that doesn't have as many followers or listeners as I do.
Right.
Somebody's going to see it on my website or on my Twitter handle throughout the day, because you could put it out, as you know, more than 2-3 times if you want, all day long.
God,
you can consistently.
Yeah.
So your sponsors are getting now, instead of the one time a day, they're getting 3 times a day. They're getting 4 mentions a day if you keep putting it out, and that just lends to a more, I guess, user-friendly, marketing-friendly type environment. And you know how it is. You call a radio station, you pay out the ass, and then you know what? Something happens with your commercial, you can't find a salesman for 4 days.
Yeah, I know what you mean. No, and you're right, and it's lost in a shuffle of a bunch of other advertisers
Absolutely.
for 5 to 7 minutes at a time, and you get lost in the shuffle. People are dial twisting and stuff. The difference is, obviously, with a podcast, they've downloaded the show or they're listening to it streaming because they want to hear you. And the likelihood
I'll give you a perfect example.
They're gonna put it on pause if they got to get out of. They're listening to it in the car or they got to stop for a second. They'll put it on pause and come back to you.
Exactly. Here's another thing that they can do. You can with podcasting, you can skip ahead if you want to. But see, I do my commercials the way I always did my commercials, even when I was breaking time. Vienna beef. I mean, look at. I just tell the people. I got 2 more people getting to jump in. I said, let me ask you. You know what my selling point is? I got Napleton Auto Group. I got Vienna beef, and I got Tony's Italian Deli. I got a small, and then a huge, and then a real huge. Companies.
Yes.
Okay, I'm on Pod, Tony's Deli. I got Napleton Auto Group. They got 130 some car lots all over the country, and then I got Vienna Beef, which is the standard beer in Chicago. And I tell the advertisers this: you think those people are stupid? You think those people are just spending money on me just because they want to help back me on this? That's partly true, but also they know they're getting a tremendous deal and they're reaching people instantly, just like our president did, and just like our president won an election with.
Well,
the same way.
Well, you've got close to over like you said, over 200,000 followers. That's a captive audience, man, and that's plenty. That's plenty of people to do business with. Whether you're selling hot dogs, Italian beefs, or cars.
I wish I would have had Twitter when I had my hot dog stands. For people that don't know, me and my wife were in the hot dog business 16, 17 years. We had 3 places, but it was back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I had to write letters to get the USA Today to come out, to get Rolling Stone magazine to come out, to get the Sun Times to come out. If I had Twitter now, if I had my stands now, well, first of all, I'd be in my 20s. But also, I can't imagine if BB's, one of our most successful stands, one of the top stands, is voted by USA Today and Rolling Stone back in the day as one of the best stands in the country, it had Twitter. I can't even imagine if we had Facebook, how big we would have been. Just like I can't imagine the radio station, the Score you and I worked at, if we had social media in the 90s, we would have all been trillionaires, all of us.
Oh, I understand.
Period.
No, I hear you, man. Well, and again, I want to get to that because I kind of want to talk about the beginnings of Chicago sports radio and really what you say about social media, I think is true. First of all, BB's Hot Dogs, if it existed today, not only with social media, but I'm sure you would have been on the Food Network with that joint, and because you guys had great food. And, I mean, you as you say, you proved yourself with the media that you had at the time. But let's get back to sports radio. Because I really think that, and granted, sports has always had its tribes of fans, Cub fans, Packer fans, whatever. But that said, I really think that the way we did sports radio, starting with the Score and stuff, really was a forebearer of today's social media. Instead of message boards and things, people would call in. I mean, there were sports call-in shows in the past, but this was, nonstop all day. And we were a daytime station, and as you know, too, at the end of the day, the lights were still flashing. People wanted to talk.
Yeah. Here's the thing, the phenomenon that was WSCR. And if I didn't have the hot dog stand, I don't even know if there is a WSCR because Dan Lee and some of the people from the radio station used to come in. And what would happen is I'd always tell them, when they were getting ready to do something, here's what you should do, here's what I would do. We always used to have fun. And Harvey Wells came in one day, and Seth Mason and Dan Lee, and they said they were thinking of starting a cool jazz or cool country station. And I said, if you do that, you're nuts. You should start a sports station.
This is 1992 or 1991.
1992.
Really, 91?
Yeah, it was really 91, really. It was about August of 91, and I begged them. I went out into a driving rainstorm during lunch and argued with them all the way out the door that if you start a country station or a cool country or a jazz station, you'll just, you'll combo it with XRT, big whoopity-doo. I said, if you start a sports station, you'll be one of 12 to 20 that are only around in this country right now. Denver had one. WFAN had one. Kansas City had one. San Diego had one. But there weren't a whole lot of them. Now there's like 500, 600, 700 of them. And really what happened was that they decided to, on my recommendation, Danny Lee tells me this to this day, to try it. Well, what ended up happening was this phenomenon called the Score. It had 3 shows during the day, no nighttime signal. Like John said, the lights were booming even after we go off the air because we only had a daytime-only signal. And what happened was a phenomenon. There were Cub fans, Sox fans, Bulls fans, Bears fans, Blackhawk fans. But what really was the nightmare for the teams was there were score fans. There were fans of the station that then, also interspersed were their fan bases of the Cubs, the Sox, and they all tuned into us to hear our opinions, to argue, to go back and forth. And it was the advent of call-in radio. And we were the first sports station to really do it from morning till night. Mark Chernoff's a friend of mine from WFAN, and he's the guy that's really put that station on the map. Mm-hmm. But they had Imus in the morning, so they didn't have sports in the morning. So whenever, I tell them the first all-sports big-time station was really WSCR, because the fan did not have the faith to start a morning off like we did with Tom Scherer. They started with Don Imus, who was strong at the time. I mean, basically was one of the top guys going at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So they covered their asses. We had WXRT to cover ours, which was the station next door to us.
Yeah, our sister station. That's
right.
Totally true. Now, I do want to point out, because I love your origin story. Before the Score, you were doing a football handicap show on a brokered station. And those are the stations and frankly, I really don't know if these stations have these kind of followings in the smaller communities, but in big cities and stuff, you were on this foreign language broker station where it's the Ukraine hour and then it's the Cuban hour, and then you come on and do an hour of sports.
I had what I would do is I'd get to do WSBC 1240, which at the time was across the street from WXRT, and it was part owned by Dan Lee.
Right.
Roy Bellavia ran it. And I told him I had an idea that I wanted to do an NFL handicap show, which, by the way, now we're hearing Brent Musburger may do a gambling show or something like that from the South Point in Las Vegas. That's the rumor we're getting. They may start a gambling network. Well, I was the first guy to do a gambling show on radio back in 1989. And what I did was I sold advertising time to people that came in my stands. I had factories around me. I had food places around me. I had a roofing place called Lindholm Roofing, who I still do business with. Vienna Beef bought spots. GE, there was a GE plant down the street. They bought spots. Amco. I sold $50 for, this is 1989, $50 for 30 seconds, $100 for a minute. I hired this guy named Tom Couch, who we know very well, who was my first producer. They were supposed to throw a producer in. I said I had to have commercials done the right way. I wanted to sound like a real station. And then I listed it in the Sun-Times with a guy named Dan Cahill. And then I got a little following. So when they told me, basically, if you want to be in radio, you got to do it yourself because you don't have the education and you're a little bit too old to jump in now. I was in my 30s at the time, my mid-30s. And I did it on a dare. Norm Weiner to this day tells me he can't believe what I did.
The program director of WXRT.
Program director at WXRT, because I was mad they wouldn't have me sit in for a thing called Athlete's Feet. So he says, well, nobody knows you. I go, well, how do I get somebody to know me unless you put me on? He goes, we're not going to put you on unless you have some backing, unless you have some tape and everything else. So I did this show, and I paid $300 an hour back in 1988, 89. A lot of money, $300 an hour. And I worked 1 hour, and basically I turned that into $1,000 a week with all this advertising I sold. So I was going to keep doing that until the sports station started. Then they hired me. And then the rest is history. The whole thing went bonkers. I mean, my life just completely changed forever.
How quickly did you and your partner, Dan Jiggets, a former CBS network sports guy, big anchor in the 80s, did a lot of big events and stuff. Well, first of all, putting you guys together, how did that work out? That wasn't the original plan, was it?
No, I had the show. Well, here was the original plan. The original plan, from what I understand it to be, first of all, Bruce Wolf was supposed to be the guy that was going to be sitting in. Bruce Wolf was still a local broadcaster here in Chicago. Was supposed to be the guy that was supposed to be to do it with Dan Jiggets. He got cold feet or something. He changed his mind. He was doing TV, but I don't think he ever had a lot of faith in the radio station at the time and where it was going. He heard it was a daytime. A lot of guys turned us down.
Right, because, again, this is Chicago, number 3 market in the country.
Right.
And it's a daytime-only station, literally sun up to sundown. So not even 6 p.m., in the dead of winter, 4:15 in the afternoon. All right, good night. We got to go now because the sun's going down.
Literally. And all the other stations, 30 other stations are still rolling, 40 other stations are rolling, and Dan McNeil's got to say goodbye at 4:30. because the sun went down. I mean, where were we at, the 1860s? I mean, the sun's come down. I thought a posse was coming into town to pull us out of the building.
Well, these were this was a small station. I mean, just in terms of its wattage, it was such a small station surrounded by 24-hour stations, established networks, and local affiliates, and big radio stars up and down the dial.
Right. So what happened was they got Tom Scher, who Tommy was an anchor for Channel 5. He was our most prominent guy, to be honest with you.
Yep.
And I think they wanted to center it around him, which I can't blame them at the time. That's probably was a good strategy. Then they hired Wolf. Decided he didn't want to do it. They told me they were going to give me a tryout. They brought Jigs in to sit in on my show, the NFL Handicap show, and I guess we did okay. They saw there was some possibility, but we were going to be. But they insist to this day, Seth Mason and Dan Lee, that they wanted middays. Middays had to be strong because it was the only full day part, and that wasn't going to be affected by the time. So they put me and Jigs together. They put the African American Harvard graduate and the street kid, high school dropout, the white boy, and they put us together. And usually, and it clicked. It clicked really, really quick. And then in the afternoon, we had just tremendous cachet with Terry Boers, Dan McNeil, and Brian Hanley. They rotated. So we were the only show that was full-time, so we had a little bit of advantage on everybody. But I'll tell you what, it all worked. The teams were put together. It was genius by Dan Lee and Seth Mason, Harvey Wells, and all the people that do it. Jeff Schwartz was a marketing genius. We had girls at remotes that were hotter than hot from modeling agencies called Scorekeepers. They did everything right, but they only had to spend a limited amount of money because they had WXRT. To give everybody an example, back in 1992, they sold WSCR spots to Score for $12. By the end of the first year, WSCR was selling their spots for $200 a shot. We made it in the black our first year, and they were basically just using us as a combo for WXRT.
Right,
what ended up happening?
Added bonus, you buy spots on XRT, we'll offer you on the Score.
But what happened was XRT ended up being the added bonus by the end of the year. I mean, really, stop and think about it. And I can understand there were some frayed feelings at WXRT because we hit everything by storm. Even friends of mine, I could just tell, they couldn't believe what was happening. They've been doing it for 15, 20, 25 years, busting their tail, and all of a sudden a bunch of Type A morons come walking in on the other side. And then, the next thing you know, we're one of the top 5 stations in the city by far. I don't care what anybody says at that time. I knew the buzz on the street. I was there every day. We were one of the top 5 cities. We equaled the Loop as far as buzz and as far as money and everything else. And they were a big time station, 24 hours back in the 80s.
Well, that's the thing. It was the cool music station suddenly had to deal with the frat house suddenly breaking in. And also the interesting thing was, like you said, the Score built this community that loved having the opportunity to sit and listen all day long and call in. And it really was, again, what we see now with social media and cool podcasts, cool websites, cool streaming shows.
I have 5 scrapbooks at home, just of stuff that we used to have to do. I used to call the papers. I used to make sure the Score's name was involved. Half of the things that got into Score for other people, me and Jeff Schwartz put in.
Oh, sure.
We should because I understood that by being in retail, you got to let the people know about you. You got to let the people know about you, and if you don't come out to play, they're going to forget about you.
Yeah, no, you're right about that, and also, again, keeping your name out there, and again, using the media outlets that were available.
Absolutely.
And this is again when newspapers mattered, television mattered. It's an interesting world, and that's honestly, man, I'm glad you're in it and you get what is going on online because I think that media is changing.
Well, I got into it late because I was making so much money.
Well, and again, you had a nice big blowtorch. I mean, again, not only
I had
Score,
Fox
but
and
again,
I have the Score. I've never had to leave Chicago. So what am I going to go do a podcast? I got a morning show. So I wasn't going to do it then. And now because, you know what, management or whatever types are going to keep certain people off, do whatever they have to do, they can't do that anymore. They can't do that anymore. If so-and-so wants to come on, we know people I know guys that haven't been on the air in 10 years. In 10 years. in Chicago or around the nation. I know guys that have lived in Dick Biondi, the great rock and roll guy, has worked in 26 different cities or 26 different venues. I was blessed to just work in Chicago. Arnie Spanier, a sports guy, one-on-one radio. I go, Arnie, you're doing radio in Vermont on the ESPN. Why are you living in Vermont? He goes, that's where the job was. So I've been very fortunate.
Arnie's a road warrior. Yeah, you're right. And Arnie is your typical kind of
absolutely
lifer broadcaster, but willing to go city to city wherever, like he said, wherever the.
You know how much you love your craft to maybe go somewhere when you've been on top of the heap and you're going to go maybe to Connecticut or you're going to go to some station in Vermont and because you want to do the things you love. You're still getting paid. You're still a name. But I mean, that's how much people don't understand. If you're in the sports radio business or in the radio business, for a lot of guys, and they're not as good as they used to be, it's a paycheck. For me, it was never a paycheck. We were supposed to be out of business in 6 months. So I said, I'm going for it. And that's just the way it is. I was making a living before I got into it. I didn't have illusions of grandeur. It just happened.
What do you think the first big break was to get you guys notice? Yeah, okay. You think it was at the Ditka show, and also the circumstances of the score and the Bears at the time.
McCaskey.
When Ditka blew up at the media.
Yeah, I think when Ditka blew up at the media in '92, wanted to challenge Neil from Northlake. But first of all, they signed Mike Ditka. That was a huge signing. He's still the coach of the Bears. That legitimized us. I think what legitimized the station was certain things every guy would do. My big coming out party was April when me and Michael McCaskey went at it, back and forth on the air. And it was a vicious give and take after the Bears got rid of Jay Hilgenberg for a draft pick. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I've never been treated ever since by the Bears with any kind, and not that I deserve it, but McCaskey, see, the problem with the Chicago people that own stations, they hold grudges forever, much to their detriment. They hold grudges forever. Mike McCaskey and I haven't said a word to each other since April of 1992.
I know people who, through family friends, have worked with the McCaskies.
Yep.
And we're very happy to sit me down anytime and say, let me tell you about that North guy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's just the way it was. I blew him out of the water. I was the voice of the guy, the average guy. They told me I was encouraged by the station. I wasn't discouraged. Of course, some of the other guys, there was a little bit, I thought, of envy and jealousy at the time that I could feel, but I didn't have no proof of. But also, it helped the whole overall station. And every guy had a signature moment. Every guy at that station or every person on the air. So, I never looked at it as anything else but trying to make us the best that we could be. We were the best sports station by far in the country. I think our third or fourth year in, by far.
Well, I think you're right. And also I think because we were unconventional, and I shouldn't include myself when I say we.
Oh, yeah, you should, because the production was quirky, too. The production was different.
Oh,
I mean, I promoted a restaurant by crashing a plane into the parking lot of it. It was called Dakota's.
Was that? Which place was it? Dakota's, that's right.
We wanted to get something to eat. We were going to land. The plane crashes into the parking lot, and then we go, well, we're okay. Let's get out of here, and let's go get something to eat at Dakota's. I mean, we actually had a plane crash, Tom Couch and I. I mean, so that's how crazy we were,
That's true.
And Dan Lee let us do it. Nowadays, you couldn't do any of that stuff.
Well, I wanted to talk about that because, yes, we were. The point is, yes, the editorial direction was unconventional, and management stayed out of the way. They were okay with it.
Well,
That's
because they knew right from the get-go. I fought them from day one about everything. If I was going to make it, I was going to make it on my own terms. I was a 22-year-old out of Syracuse. I was a 39-year-old man that was told he wasn't going to make it. All of a sudden, I'm on the air talking to Mayor Daley and John Madden my first day. So now I was going to do it on my own terms, even if they told me not to. So what they would tell me is, don't do this, and then I would do it. Then they'd yell at me, and I'd say, then they'd find out it worked. When Ron Gleason told me, after I said I was out all night getting slashed, the next day I brought it up on here. He goes, you can't talk about drinking on the air. I go, well, then you might as well close the place up. I said, if you're going to have a street kid say he was at Gibson's drinking Diet Pepsi all night, you're out of your mind. And I said, I want to embrace that. I want to talk about going on a world tour. I want to talk about the 15 places I went to. I want to talk about the guys I ran into. I want to talk about running into Keanu Reeves. I want to talk. These are all guys I ran into in the 90s. Keanu Reeves, Jason Patrick, that I became friends with. Dennis Rodman. Jeremy Roenick, because I was a poor man's Harry Carey at that time. If I could put myself in his company, he was out, I was out every night almost.
Well, that was the thing. The games are downtown and everything.
Absolutely.
And you're hanging out afterwards, and there's, the nightlife of Chicago.
Right.
And suddenly you go from, closing up the hot dog joint and waiting for tomorrow to suddenly being able to really enjoy going to the games for free, covering them, speaking your mind, and
getting tickets to go see Frank Sinatra sitting at his table at Gibson's in the back, talking to him for an hour, going to see him in Las Vegas, going to see Don Rickles with John Suntress and a group of people that I love, and then going backstage and then having dinner with Don Rickles. This stuff's not possible without WSCR Chicago, period, end of story.
I was Forrest Gump. I really felt like I was Forrest Gump.
You were great.
Ridiculous ride where I would, meet these Rip
and
Torn.
And we'll keep other people out of the conversation, but we had the top people. The top people. We had a TV show at Basta Pasta in Chicago, John and I.
That's true.
And my wife, Phoebe, was the executive producer. We had everybody from Jake LaMotta to Pete Rose to Mike Krzyzewski to Carlton Fisk to Will Chamberlain to Harold Ramis to Bobby the Brain Heenan to Daniel J. Travanti from Hill Street Blues. We had every top guy. People wanted to come on that show. Frankie Avalon. Unbelievable stuff. I was at Tony and Tina's wedding. Just
Frankie Avalon was on the show, was on the TV show.
Yeah, just unbelievable. We had a full house every night. I think the only two guys that didn't really draw were Eric Kramer and I think the Bears at that time. They didn't draw well, but we filled the place up on a consistent basis. Pete Rose was great the week after Jim Gray. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience, and we had so much fun on that show that I'm actually thinking, Shake, to go down to the cable access place down the street, and me and you got to revive this thing. We'll do a Comcast thing.
I need new suits. I need a new wardrobe.
We don't know. We'll just be we'll call it the Busters. Busters.
Oh, we'll just be dressed down. We won't have to.
We'll dress down and we'll have the burnt out cigarette. We'll relight it. You know what I mean? We'll have a 2-day growth of beard. We'll call ourselves the Bust Outs. It'd be great. Seriously, it's all fun. It's all joke and fun and games at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
That's all it is.
Well, I wanted to get your opinions because, as you say, you're willing to talk about anything.
Anything.
And off the air, you were telling me your frustrations with the Batman Superman movie of last year.
Well, yeah. Now, first of all, I can't be blindsided. I got to know when this stuff's coming because it affects me. Because when you're a kid growing up, comic books were huge for me back in the '60s and back in the '70s and the '50s. Big. We used to go to this place called Kay's Drugstore on the corner of Glenwood and Ridge and steal 1 or 2 a week. You know what I mean? She'd turn her back. She'd be at the soda fountain. We'd be pulling one. I'm not proud of it now. I'd send her the money, but I know she's dead. But we used to go for Superman, Batman comics, wait for the new editions. People did that. And what was great was the Superman annuals. That would be the thicker comic book that would cost you more money. Okay?
Yes. I know everyone listening knows exactly what kind of
right. So we waited for those, and we didn't steal every time.
80-page giants.
Yeah, you had to have money. You had to have money, and it was a good read. The annual, the Superman annual, the Batman annual, DC Comics. The other characters to me, like the Flash and the Green Lantern, and guys like that, they were readable, but they weren't the stars of the show back when I was getting comic books. It was Batman and Superman. Superman was the king. Batman was the second in command. And then if you bought those comics, that means the other ones were sold out. The Batman and Superman was sold out if you wanted to. Then I found Western comics. And I was shocked to hear this from you. I'm stunned. I'm hurt. I'm besieged with grief. I love this guy, and I hate to say it in the FA now because I might be accused of having some sort of thing going with him, called the Rawhide Kid. And I started buying his comics in 62, 63, 64.
Okay.
Lo and behold, I'm talking to you the other day on the air, off the air.
Yeah, that's right.
In my car, me and my wife, and you tell me that the man had a coming out party, I believe, is what they say nowadays.
Well, they rebooted the character in the early 2000s and turned him gay.
And from what I understand, and I'm happy about this because I don't think you should use any kind of reason, racial, sexual, whatever, to try to reboot anything, okay? Sometimes that can blow up in your face. And I'm happy to hear that basically the old school guard of the Rawhide Kid, a man, we guard the gates. I guess that it didn't hit off as well as they thought. Am I right in assuming this?
Well, the series sold fine to the modern audience, but the old guard did complain and say, "Hey, what are you doing to the Rawhide Kid? Wait a minute."
I mean,
it was all, it was done, honestly, it was done in fun. Honestly, Mike, it was just like Zorro.
I don't think it was funny, Shake. I got to be honest with you.
Now, wait a minute.
I don't think it was I don't think it was funny. You just can't throw that at me after 30, 40 years of a fan base. You can't do that.
What did you think of George Hamilton's Zorro the Gay Blade?
You know what? I've never watched the whole thing. I like the Antonio Banderas one better, but nobody's going to beat Guy Williams. So that's just the way I am.
Well, no, and I agree with that.
But I do like Blazing Saddles. It's always good to take slaps and stuff. It was no big deal.
The thing. It was a parody, and really, this Rawhide Kid was really just fun. It was.
Then they make the guy look menacing, black leather pants.
Well, he always had that. Honestly, that was always.
Well, he was flashy. That's why I love the guy. But he looked like one of the outfits I saw him. It looked like the Elvis, the outfit Elvis wore in the '68 special. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yes, I do. Exactly.
So that's what they copied it after, basically.
Oh, totally. No question. And seriously, like Don Knotts shows up in the reboot and everything. I mean, it's John Severin, the artist, had a ball. And
that's fine.
I tell you, Rod Zimmerman. It wasn't for the Rawhide Kid, but I forget what controversy drummed him out of comics. But he was a Howard Stern guy. He was a Howard Stern comedy writer.
Well, I'll also say this: Stan Lee. I did not know that the Rawhide Kid was Marvel. Was he Marvel?
Say it again about Stan Lee? Yes, he was Marvel.
Well, I didn't know. Was the Rawhide Kid Marvel?
Yes.
That's unbelievable. I never knew that. But that tells you something about Stan Lee. He made a Western guy, jump out at you. I mean, I was looking for alternatives at the time. That doesn't sound like a good thing to say in light of what happened to the Rawhide Kid. But I was looking for other things than the superhero. I was looking for a regular dude, and the Rawhide Kid was that. So I loved the Rawhide Kid. And there was another guy. What was he called? Another Western star, Colt something or another.
Kid Colt, Outlaw.
Yeah. But I like the Rawhide Kid, so good for him. I'm glad. Is he back now? Is he back? Did he do it in Heche? Did he come back to where he was before? I mean, what did he do? I mean, seriously now.
He experimented. It's like college. He experimented while he was out on the frontier.
That's exact, boy. And what a frontier it was. What a frontier it was. But the Rawhide Kid was great. And I love comic books, and I wasn't happy about the Superman-Batman fight. That's the stupidest concept of all time. I could have saved the money. Superman, any day of the week and twice on Sunday, kicks Batman's ass unless Batman throws some kryptonite, at him, and it hits him, and he gets weakened.
Well, I told you is in the nerd culture, and whenever it's is it Batman against Thor, Batman against the Hulk, Batman against the whole Justice League, Batman usually wins because he's like Sherlock Holmes. He's just always smarter than everybody else, and he always has a plan. And usually, when it comes to Superman, the plan has to involve kryptonite.
Yes.
Because, there's no choice.
Well, I didn't watch the movie. I didn't go to the movie. I'll never go to that movie. I'll never see it on TV. I've seen it they show it on the HBO. I won't even look at it. I mean, Superman versus Batman, the dumbest thing of all time, period.
You were obviously a George Reeves Superman.
Huge.
Were you also an Adam West Batman?
Not as big as George Reeves. And I'll tell you why.
How old were you? I'm not trying to age you, but honestly, what were you, 12 or 13?
Well, listen, it was on, when Batman came out, it was huge. It was twice a week.
Right, 66.
Yeah.
It's 1966.
Listen, the monkeys and Batman in combat. Those were the three things. Those were money makers. Vic Morrow was cranking it in twice a week. The Gallant Men with David Hedison. That was with. Sure. It was combat. It was the monkeys. And Superman was 59, 60, 61, but they were in syndication. WGN played Superman every Saturday night at 6 o'clock. And we had the portable TV in the kitchen. It was still a huge series for a while. The movie Hollywoodland, I liked it. I know they had to add some storylines into it to make it longer and stuff, because it is really a short thing, the death of George Reeves. But that's a fascinating death, and I'll never forget the day that we found out he died. We were walking to school. We were third grade. You know, people talk, where were you when Kennedy died? Screw that. Where was I when George Reeves died? You know?
Really? Was it like shocking?
Everything in the movie was true. When we found out Superman died, the kids, we were depressed. That was our guy. I mean, he was bigger than, nobody realized how huge he was in 59, 60, 61. Nobody. But and the nonsense, and on top of that, you see the movie, and he wasn't happy. He had to be out of his mind. I mean, because he felt he got typecasted, and he did. But, man, if you're going to be typecasted, I mean, Roy Rogers was typecasted for 50, 60 years, never complained. You know what I mean? He just ran with
the difference with, like, Roy Rogers and Hopalong Cassidy was they were able to kind of control their shots. With the TV show, I know, Reeves, they were paying those guys nothing compared to what they were making. Well, the thing with Roy Rogers and lunch boxes, I mean, he had every kind of... Right, well, that's what I mean.
And here's the thing, Hopalong Cassidy, though, was not Hopalong Cassidy. You know, he was played by somebody.
Right. William Boyd. Yeah, but he bought the rights to.
But Roy Rogers was Roy Rogers.
Movies. And the same. Well, but that's
when you walked up to Gene Autry and you said, "Hi, Mr. Autry," he said, "Hello." When you walked up to John Wayne and you said, "Hi, Mr. Donovan," he looked at you like, "Who are you talking to?" Because he was playing a character. Roy Rogers was Roy Rogers. And the cool thing about Roy Rogers was he could do everything that he did in the movies, and he'd do it right in front of you, at the Chicago Amphitheater back in the day, in front of 20,000 people.
Oh, I believe that. Absolutely, man. No, and I saw him on the channel Decades, and they were showing celebrity bowling from the 70s. Yeah. He was literally the best celebrity bowler.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he could easily roll over 200. Like, just was amazing, was a machine.
And Trigger was a national icon. I mean, that's the way it was. I mean, his horse was as big a part of his act. And Trigger, people don't know this, if you love the movie Robin Hood with Errol Flynn, who's my idol of all time. If you love the movie Robin Hood, Olivia de Havilland in that movie rides Trigger.
That's crazy.
And Trigger, then Roy Rogers purchases Trigger. And that's how that whole thing starts. And Trigger became as much of a fan. I mean, I was as much of a fan of the horse and the dog and Dale Evans. It was a family thing. It was the first really reality show back in the 50s. It really was.
I see what you mean. You're right. Them and Ozzy Harriet, obviously. That's hilarious. You're right, though. That's very, very funny. Now, I got to ask you about action movies. All right, of that era, is Errol Flynn your top action movie?
Nobody ever better. I'm prejudiced to a point where I've read everything on the man. I've read his autobiography, and I'm not a book reader. Even My Wicked Ways. I've read. I've seen the movie, which was done terribly. They have a movie with Kevin Kline that was supposed to come out. They're still waiting on that.
Hey, on that movie, the TV movie of that, wasn't the guy who played Zorro in the 80s? Wasn't it Duncan Fegredo?
Yes.
Wasn't he Errol Flynn?
And it was okay.
Yeah, God, I know.
And then Barbara Hershey played Lily D'Amata. I know everything about the guy from his. Listen. The guy drank himself. So drank himself to death. And I was trying to do that myself. I don't know if I was living vicariously through him, not drinking myself to death, but drinking on a continuous basis. And I had to finally stop. I mean, but this guy died at 49. So I mean, it was a shame. He was so talented and so underappreciated as an actor. He was as good an actor as Gable. I don't care what anybody says. And he was as good an actor as other ones, but he was not. He had scandal in his life, and he wasn't married to his craft.
No, you're right. I think. Well, and again, I mean, he kind of fell into acting. I mean, he was a gun runner in the 20s and 30s.
Yep.
And, in Tasmania.
He fought with Hemingway in the Spanish War. Yep. I mean, so that's my kind of guy. And then he does half his own stunts, only half, because you weren't allowed to do them all. I mean, that's why I like Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen to me is an underwhelming actor, period, end of story. Didn't want a lot of dialogue. But if in the movie Papillon, people don't know this.
Oh, my God.
He jumps off the cliff. That is him. Read it, and you would be nuts to do it. But even in the motorcycle scenes in The Great Escape, that's why I love those guys.
Oh,
they did their own stuff.
Great Escape,
oh my God,
7, those are great. But really, I agree with you. Papillon is probably one of his greatest acting roles.
I think it's his best
really
ever.
Yeah, I think you're right, man.
I thought that he did his best to be underwhelming and just to be cool. See, Yul Brynner never liked him when they did the Magnificent Seven. Never liked him. Said he tried to upstage him. You'll see the movie. Yep. He tips his cap when he's not supposed to. He'll play with something on his wrist when Yul Brynner's talking. Yul Brynner never liked him in the movie, but it was a great movie. It was just a fantastic movie with the top stars and actual guys that you wouldn't want to fight. Actually, in real life, like Charles Bronson, James Coburn, Robert Vaughn. You don't want a piece of these guys in real life. So that's why the movie was great.
I hear you, man. You know, of course, you had the pleasure of interviewing Robert Vaughn
on
the radio show. And I had the pleasure of talking to him that following weekend.
I was at the Playboy Mansion. I'll never forget. I did 3 days at the Playboy Mansion in a different way than most people would think, but we did. Christy Hefner and Hugh Hefner and Billy Maravich said, bring the show out there. It's the Millennial 2000. I mean, Howard Stern and I were the only guys ever allowed on those grounds at that time. And Robert Colt walks up to me. I spy. But the best was Martin Landau. And Martin Landau, I had just seen Ed Wood. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. These guys from Mission Impossible. And then Hugh Hefner comes and sits down. And then Vern Troyer tugging at my pants leg. I'm going, who's down there? It was him. It was the little guy from Austin Powers. It was just hilarious. The grotto, the whole scene. Those guys were salt of the earth, old school. They were the old school actors that William Powell used to be. Those were my William Powells. You know what I mean?
I'm a huge William Powell fan. No, absolutely. Robert Culp, not only great actor, but very good screenwriter. Wrote Bob Carroll, Ted and Alice, big important
and laid the sausage. And laid the sausage.
That's true.
I mean, my God. I mean, these guys, James Caan had his own room at the mansion. His own room.
Oh, yeah.
He had his own room.
They were of that original Hefner crowd.
Yeah, just phenomenal.
They were the old guard.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
And then I went to the Beverly Hilton, or the Polo Lounge, sat there and watched people come in and out. You know, some old star. I mean, I'm just looking. That is just a trip that I'll never forget. I just couldn't believe it. The game room is not even attached to the real mansion. The game room is like down about 500 feet. Nothing but video. You have video pong. You have all the old school Evel Knievel pinball machines. Elton John. I mean, it just was he lived the way he wanted to live, and he's still ticking. That's unbelievable.
Oh yeah. You know, what do you think? Remember, wasn't it last year they announced that they're trying to sell the mansion?
Yeah, I mean, I still go by the one on State Parkway and reminisce. I mean, that it was so cool that.
His Chicago,
he lived in the middle of the block. I mean, he lived in the middle of the block in a 24-room house with him and staff and, anybody that would straggle in. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I'm assuming, I don't remember when. No, he was still in Chicago when they were doing Playboy.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. They came to the mansion.
That was like the hippest.
Yeah.
That was one of the
hippest. It was the hippest.
Shows.
Sammy Davis. He'd be talking to some girl, and then Sammy Davis Jr. would walk up and go, "Hi, F," and all of a sudden,
"Hey, man."
Yeah, and then Frank Sinatra.
I'm gonna sing for you. All right, Hey, Don Adams is about to do a little shtickle, and then I'm gonna.
Ladies and gentlemen, this guy's a real good guy. Say hello to Mort Saul. You know what I mean? They bring on Mort Saul.
With the newspaper under his
arm.
With
the newspaper under his arm. Lenny Bruce was on.
I think President Johnson ought to think twice about our space program.
Yeah. And then you'd have Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce was on Playboy After Dark, who started it all. So, I mean, the history of that's one of the shows that you'd love to see them bring back and just play just for the history element of it. Alfred Hitchcock is walking through the front room and says, "Hey, Alfred, how you doing?" Just stuff like that.
I had a woman on last year who wrote an amazing book about the history of the Playboy clubs. And it was fantastic. And honestly, between the bunnies and the comedians that worked there, all the amazing jazz acts and stuff, how important Hefner was to jazz, really from the 50s through, the existence of the clubs. And the
archaic nature of it, eventually. I mean, I remember going to the Playboy Club in my 20s, and my buddy Joe Moran had a key card. And that's how you got in. I mean, you had to know somebody that got in. But once you got in, okay, it was wild. But things were changing. I mean, you could see more tailored shenanigans on Division than you could at the Playboy Mansion. I mean, at the Playboy Club. So you'd go pay this big money, and you'd see a bunch of girls walking around in rabbit costumes, which at the time was pretty cool. But then you'd walk outside, and there's a girl with a miniskirt up to her, you know what. So things were changing. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to bring it back.
I'm actually talking to a woman ordering a drink. She's got ears on her head and a bunny rabbit tail as she's talking to me.
Hello.
Yeah.
Give me a gin and tonic, sweetie.
So if you want to march about something, that's something that you should have marched about back in the day. You know what I mean?
Well, they did. The women's movement was out and angry.
Gloria Steinem, by the way, was a former bunny. I want to just throw that in.
She did it as an expose. She was doing an article.
That's her story. She's sticking to it. I think she liked the action, the old lady. God bless her.
But Hefner was on the right side of radical politics
all the time.
So I mean, he was of two sides.
He was Trump before Trump. Only he did it in he had to fight him off. Wasn't as bombastic, but he would go on to talk shows and fight the Friedans of the world, the Steinems of the world, nowadays, it would be, some of the arguments are so stupid nowadays, but then they were objectified in a lot of ways. But my argument always was that, I knew Joe Collins, okay? And I saw Joe Collins at Gibson's.
Joe Collins, we should clarify for my audience, Joe Collins was a playmate that performed for the troops during. And
also went out with my friend Bo Berlinski back. He was a Playboy baseball player. Now she's got to be in her 70s, but I met her, and she's got a beautiful daughter now. And I remember seeing her at Gibson's in the 90s. Did you ever feel objectified? She goes, no, until people brought it up. I mean, people made a big deal out of it. She goes, we loved the life. It was a great life. It was a good living. I was in a magazine. But it took nerve back in the 60s and early 70s to do nude things, nude layouts where they did show everything at the time.
Well, again, he was leading the sexual revolution.
Larry Flynn took it to the next level. Larry Flynn took it to the next level. Big time.
Yeah, he did. He took it back to the.
Well, I mean, you got no fear. I mean, that's how you make it in life.
That's true. You're right about that.
If you
and I
think
like
about
from that standpoint,
anything that's radical, or that you think the people would like, if you like it, you're saying to yourself, "That's how I felt about sports radio." That's how. Why wouldn't other people like it if I love it? Yeah, and you just go for it. And if you think about it, if Larry Flint would have once stopped and thought for 10 minutes, the ramifications, he would have never made it. He would have never made it. And if he would have known all the ramifications, because once you're in it, Shaky, me to a smaller extent, I was Trump before Trump. I had a guy tell me that the other day walking down the street. I go, what'd you think of Trump? The guy goes, man, go ahead, good for him. He goes, you were Trump before Trump. You took all the same crap, the racial stuff. I was writing for the Chicago Defender, and I was working with Dan Jiggets. The Defender, the #1 African-American weekly, and Dan Jiggets, the first Harvard black co-captain, and I was being called a racist back in the day because I would just state things as I thought them, and that's always the thing they look at. And I just kept going, and just like I admire people that aren't going to let people's words try to sidetrack them, but sooner or later it can take its toll. That's why when you see people do what they do, like a Larry Flint, a Donald Trump, a Hugh Hefner, the Beatles, even guys like Don Kirshner, who took over the Monkees. Did you see that documentary on the Monkees?
Oh, God, yeah.
I mean, really,
it was amazing.
He should still be getting checks. He probably is. But
well, he did. Oh, yeah, no, I think the stuff on the first 2 albums that were Kirshner Productions. Oh, yeah, and well, he's passed away, but I'm sure his estate, still makes the money.
Geez, I still think the guy, I never think of Don Kirshner being dead. Any man that brought me the Midnight Special in my world. You know what I mean? I mean, when they used to have rock groups at 12 o'clock at night, you'd have the top 5 bands in the world playing on your TV set. Now you got, go to. I still think there's a place for a show like that. I still think you can make it on a show like that, But they have videos now and everything else that you can go to in 1 second. So now they got to go out and earn a living by actually touring.
Well, it's weird. As we're talking, Riverdale is debuting tonight on the CW, and that's a reboot of the Archies. And it's just the regular Archie. It's a teenage drama in the way that,
right.
the Archie comics were or whatever. But I know that Archie has been playing with the idea of doing, an Archie's band, a new Archie's band.
Let me tell everybody this.
The best way to, do it.
When I was driving to Florida, well, not me, my father, we were in a station wagon, 1969, 3-day trip. I wanted to kill myself. 5 stations on the radio. There's no satellite radio, nothing. You have your 2 magazines. You read those the first 10 minutes you're in the car. And then all you do is keep asking your dad, are we there yet, for 3 days? And it's the most boring, mundane ride. And the Archies were the number 1 song, Sugar, Sugar. I'm not kidding you, folks. Right. You can laugh all you want. That song was a monster. It was a monster hit. Yeah. Sugar, honey, honey, you are. That simpleton song was, and that was a Don Kirshner production, by the way.
Given to the Monkees originally, and they
so
turned
he
it down.
said, I'm going to stick it in there, you know what, and make a cartoon of this song and show them how really talented they really were. And he kicked their ass with that song. That song, and if the Monkees would have made it, it would have been just as big, but he gave it, and they made a cartoon out of it with studio musicians.
You're right, and also the publishing company that owns the rights to Archie, all the rights, including the cartoons and stuff, had a ton of money.
Don Kirshner's a genius. He really was. He was a genius, and Boyce and Hart were the guys that wrote the songs. Neil Diamond wrote. I mean, they're the top writers for the Monkees. I love Mickey Dolenz. He's going to be at the. In fact, he followed me on Twitter the other day. So when somebody. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Olivia Newton-John, Jennifer Lopez, and Mickey Dolenz, and I'm more excited about Mickey Dolenz following me than anybody else. He's going to be at the Arcadia February 11th in St. Charles, Illinois. So he's a smart guy. He latched on to me. He knows I'm going to talk about it and stuff like that, and why not? He's really had. He was a talented guy before the Monkees. He did a show called Circus Boy. And it was a TV series, very popular, about a moment of silence for the circus, by the way. But that was that was the big show back even before the Monkees. So he was one of the few guys that had some experience.
I hear you. I'm glad you mentioned the circus because, everyone laughs at what looks like underwear on the outside of their pants with superheroes, but that came from acrobats in the circus and strongmen from the circus. And that was just the leotards, and that was what, they wore. And, unfortunately, the circus has become so insignificant that everyone's like...
Well, because you're fighting off everybody, because the circus isn't... I just talked to a guy that took his 5-year-old daughter to the circus. She loved it. He goes, now there's not going to be no more circus. Every one of us went to the circus, at least once or twice. There was no PETA. Look, these elephants love to perform. Now the elephant's going to be standing in the middle of some big pen at Brookfield Zoo while somebody puts a shower of water on him twice a day. This guy was a performer. When they got rid of the elephants, of course the circus died. You cannot, that was the number 1 thing at Ringling Brothers. Forget about the ringmaster, the lions, the tigers, the acrobats. The elephant is on their posters more prominently than anybody else. And when there's no elephants, the circus really stopped being the circus, period.
Did you like the circus when you were a kid? I got to be honest, I didn't like the circus. I mean, I liked the idea of it, and then we got there, it stank.
I got to be honest, I love because I would never go back unless I had kids. It's a kid thing. Once you're 9, if you go to the circus, you get beat up by your friends. You got to be 7 or 8. If you tell your friends you went to the circus and you're 15, you're getting an ass kicking. I mean, that's it. Yet I'm the guy that will watch Bozo reruns. So what's wrong with me?
Yeah, but Bozo was different. Bozo was a funny show. That was
the circus was entertaining.
Really?
Look at all you have to do is see Trapeze with Burt Reynolds. I mean, excuse me, Mr. Lancaster, didn't mean to demean you, because Burt Reynolds is good, but Burt Lancaster was the man.
Oh, that's a great movie.
Trapeze with Tony Curtis, Gina Lollobrigida. You know, you had the ringmasters, the whole ball, the 3 rings. But you know what? It's a 145-year run. Good for you. Goodbye. You know, I remember they were doing Circus of the Stars on ABC with elephants and everything.
Sure. Here's Ted Knight riding an elephant. Jamie Farr is about to cross the tightrope. Hey, I'm acting.
The communists took over, Shake. What are we going to do? They don't want us to have any fun.
Man, I got some Glenn Ford dirt.
I love Glenn Ford. Let's talk about Glenn Ford now. I love him.
Well, first of all, he is a god to the geek community as Jonathan Kent in the original Superman.
Oh, God bless him. When he was in that, he had to be like 3 sheets to the wind while he was shooting that movie. I mean,
he's on camera for like maybe 10 minutes. Well, that and when they find the rocket, obviously. But that speech to his son when he's like, "You're here for a reason."
Great.
I don't know what it is. Honestly, he brings gravitas to that movie the way that Obi-Wan Kenobi did, Alec Guinness, to Star Wars.
Here's my deal with Glenn Ford. He, from day one, was a star. He got them all. He tagged all the women. My wife didn't know he was as big a star, but since I watch TCM now, BB and I watch it. I'm a member of the Back Lot Club. I'm excited.
That's great. Are you ever going to go to one of their...
Yeah, I want to meet Ben Mankiewicz in person.
I don't blame you. I love Ben Mankiewicz.
Had a new silk suit on. He had a new silk suit on the other day. Ben's stepping up.
That's
but
beautiful.
Glenn Ford, from The Courtship of Eddie's Father to 3:10 to Yuma, a lot of his movies weren't weren't the overwhelming big hits, but he was always working, always prepared, and he could drink anybody under the table, from what I understand.
Well, he's solid. No, great actor. But I've read, I told you this off the air a night or two ago, I read this great John Wayne biography that Scott Iman wrote. It's incredible. It's just from a couple years ago. It's so good. And one of the films, they weren't in the film together, but Wayne's production company made a Glenn Ford film, and they approached him to be the lead in a film. And word got back that Glenn Ford's like, well, what kind of gift are you going to give me at the end of the production? And Patrick Wayne, or not Patrick, I forget which son was the producer's son, but he goes back to the Duke and he's like, we got to buy a gift for Glenn Ford. He's like, what the hell is he talking about? He goes, supposedly at the end of every film shoot, he gets a gift. He's like, well, buy him a gift. And he goes, what if it's a $40,000 yacht that he's expecting? So all he wanted was a film projector. And so they're like, fine, get him the film projector. But the other story I heard, Robert Wool, from HBO, and then Cobb, the very funny comedian and actor, he told a story that Glenn Ford, apparently the rumors were that Glenn Ford was so cheap, he would take his wardrobe from the movies home with him. And he'd go, that's a nice jacket. And he would just walk off with it, to the point where literally he was even like sets where he's like, oh, that's a pretty.
He was married like 4 or 5 times too.
Well, when I'm getting to that stuff, but it got so bad supposedly that whatever studio, whether it was Fox or Columbia, they put him in B movies with cheap sets and cheap furniture because they're like, fine, that's all.
Oh yeah, a lot of those old movies, they're unbelievable. He loved Rita Hayworth. He tagged her. She was unbelievable.
Yes.
They had an on and off type of thing for 30 years.
Wow, I didn't know it was that long. Judy Garland. I just read Judy Garland.
Yeah, Judy Garland. Debbie Reynolds, I think, did her thing with them too. So I mean, you know what? Back then, if you're Glenn Ford, you're Sinatra, you're doing the Tender Trap or something like that. Tony Randall. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, just walk. There's women all over the place. I mean, so
we got it firsthand from Robert Vaughn, who wouldn't name names, but just said being a young man in the '60s and being a lead on a very popular television show, he's like,
I couldn't believe Robert Vaughn telling us, yeah, I wasn't going to get married then. I just got married recently, he says. Talk like that really low, just like he did his characters, whether it's the...
Oh, my, we talked to Napoleon Soldier.
He was awesome. He was great, and he... And he was a lifelong bachelor for the most part till the end. I was really bothered when he died. I'm getting to the point now. A lot of my guys are starting to die, and it's starting to bother me a little bit. Arnold Palmer died this year. What really took me. He was born on the same day as me, September 10th. He was my idol growing up. As far as he was a Virgo.
Wow, that's cool.
He was a guy that he was my first star. I've been toying with writing a book about called my first star. He was the first guy I saw on TV. I was like 7, 8 years old. It was a Saturday tournament, the Shell Wonderful World of Golf, and I fell in love with the guy from there on. I mean, he was a swashbuckling guy. Believe me, if there would have been social media back then, he would have been in trouble himself. They didn't call him the king for nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Did you get a chance? I can't remember.
Talked to Arnold Palmer twice on the phone. Never met him. Cried profusely when I found out he died.
Yeah.
But just, I mean, you figure you're a kid and you're 7, and now you're 64, and your guy just died. So a guy you followed from beginning to end and was always exemplary, class act. You know?
I understand. Well, you know my feelings for Ali, and I got to meet Ali before, about 25 years ago, and I had that same feeling this summer when he passed because all my life I was an Ali fan.
I wait for Joe Frazier.
Yeah, no.
I felt that way.
Sure.
I'm feeling that way. Well, Presley killed me. I mean, it almost killed me. I'm not kidding you, Shake. It almost killed me. People don't know. I was into entertainment and politics as much as sports. And when Presley, I was hanging out at Sun High School, and when we found out he died, I mean, we got together. We were all stunned. I mean, we couldn't believe it. We knew he was in bad shape at 42. That one threw me for a loop. Pete Maravich threw me for a loop, dying at 42 years old. I'll tell you who's the most remarkable. I never thought somebody would take Presley's place in my world. This Mick Jagger is just unbelievable. Unbelievable entertainer, unbelievable person, unbelievable that this guy at 70-something, I heard him on a jukebox in 1965 at Round Lake Beach. They had a bandstand. And I can't believe the guy's still going. I just saw this documentary of them in Cuba. They're unbelievable. They are unbelievable.
Yes. I wanted to ask you about documentaries.
Yeah, I love them.
Because you're a big documentary guy as well. All right, a couple sports ones. First of all, I'm glad because when you said Arnold Palmer, what I thought of was that amazing, was it the 1960 U.S. Open that HBO does the documentary, and it's Palmer, Nicklaus, and Ben Hogan. And it's one of the most amazing true sports stories of all those events and how those three guys going into that tournament and what happens at that tournament. It's really one of the best sports stories.
A great documentary on Joe Namath.
That's a great one.
HBO's now fallen off a little bit. They're doing stuff on women that like to get drunk called risky drinking and all this nonsense. Women like to drink. Congratulations. So,
I'm interested with HBO before we leave HBO for a second. With Bill Simmons coming over, don't get me wrong, I wasn't a fan of his weekly show. I thought it sucked, but he, is one of the big creative minds behind 30 for 30 at ESPN, and I do think that him coming.
Well, he got let go now. I mean, they just canceled that show.
For their documentaries. Oh, no. I know the TV show.
Well, he's very lucky, man. That's all I'm going to tell you, because I've never latched on to the guy. I think you're right. He's more behind the scenes as a guy that's going to hold up together a franchise. He's made a couple career missteps, but he's also his own man, so I have no problem with that, and he's done well for himself. But it's the nonsense like Rachel Nichols getting her third chance at ESPN. People like that keep hanging around because her father's a bigwig in the business. Those are the people that piss me off.
I can appreciate that, but all right, back to documentaries. Did you see the John Daly 30 for 30?
Yeah. Oh, no, they do a great job. I love the 30 for 30. I love them. I love them.
Yeah, I mean that. Honestly, I sports documentaries is still like an interesting subject for me. I think that's. I really don't know. I get
they're great,
and I think the stories are incredible.
Jesse Owens. Look at the Jackie Robinson movie. The movie's not bad. You know what? I know the story, but you know what? The movie's good. The way it was made, you got to add some flares to it. I thought that they dug deeper than the Robinson movie. The Jackie Robinson's movie's been done a couple times, and everything else.
Yes.
I thought they went overboard with the N-word. I know it was bad, but I thought that they really tried to really show you how racially it was in the 1940s. You didn't really need to be shown that. You knew it was like that. There could have been some, but they used that word so many times. I didn't like it all that much, but I like the Jesse Owens movie.
Yeah, the Jesse Owens movie I thought was absolutely amazing. And I felt it's fun. And now 15 years later or whatever it was, when the Oakland A's story came out, I was following it at Sporting News Radio. We were following it every day. It was a big story. So when the movie Moneyball came out, at first I kind of shrugged. I'm like, well, I know this story. I'm like,
the Moneyball thing to me is a joke because he's never won anything. I know what they're talking about and everything else, but I don't think that Andy or Billy Bean is anything that I would go. I mean, Brad Pitt playing him, the whole ball wax. I get it, but I never latched onto that movie. I'll tell you a movie I love, and I'll tell you what's a shame. And this is not a documentary. Well, it is a documentary. It's a movie, but it's one of my favorite movies, and it makes me sick that Philip Seymour Hoffman died. It really does. Because it shows you how talented he is. Charlie Wilson's War. Did you see that?
I love that movie. I've been watching. It's so funny every time, and you obviously have been watching it too because they've been playing the hell out of it lately on HBO. No, that's a real story. Real story.
Well done, well acted. If you look up Charlie Wilson, Tom Hanks has this ability to look like these people. I mean, he's just got that natural, just normal look. I mean, he did. The Mary Poppins movie, he does look strikingly like Walt Disney. I mean, it's so weird. Tom Hanks is just this normal look, and he looks like Charlie Wilson. Julia Roberts was great in it. Philip Seymour Hoffman was fantastic in it as,
Amy Adams.
Yeah. Just great.
The whole cast. Ned Beatty is
great
the
stuff.
chairman,
I mean, I can watch that movie. That's a Shawshank. I mean, I call it the Shawshank. Whenever Shawshank's and you stop, I stop at Charlie Wilson's War. But anyway, Shake, it's almost time to eat. I can do this.
I was going to say,
when can I be on Lord Balloon again? I love Lord Balloon.
And I appreciate that, and I'm really glad you came on.
We talked about a lot of nonsense.
But I liked it. So there you go. That's most of my conversation with Mike North. Like I said, I got a little timey-wimey there at the end. So I hope you made it and enjoyed my conversation. I'll have him back. I think the history of sports radio, I think, is really interesting. And like I said, I really feel like a lot of where social media went and has gone has taken its cues from the cultures that have been built up in radio, and everyone's got their kind of favorite radio station, and if you're lucky enough it wasn't just a morning show, it really was a station where you really appreciated the whole programming for more than 24 hours. There were a few stations like that in Chicago, and my station, The Score, certainly became one of those destinations. So there's a lot more interesting stories that I intend to explore in future conversations, not just with Mike, but with some of the other hosts and people that were involved with The Score, because I really do think that's interesting. I also have a couple other podcast projects that are non-comic related, but I think if you enjoy what you hear on Word Balloon, you might be interested in the stuff we talk about. And once that stuff is up and running, I will let you know. Be sure to check out Mike's podcast, Sticks and Stones. It's over at the Podcast Arena. You can subscribe via iTunes and the usual podcast platforms. But if you want to hear it streaming, it's podcastarena.com/Mike North. So in the meantime, thanks again for listening. Word Balloon today was brought to you by In Stock Trades at InStockTrades.com. And there are amazing deals happening now at In Stock Trades on very cool books. There are things like the Punisher Max Complete collection. There are a lot of great writers that are involved in this omnibus, and it has a beautiful Dave Johnson cover. It's 504 pages. It's 42% off, just $23.19. You can get Batman, Brave and Bold, the Bronze Age omnibus, featuring great work from Bob Haney and Jim Aparo. These are some of the crazy Bob Haney stories that made the Bronze Age Brave and Bold a lot of fun. And I'm one of that part of that audience that enjoyed this run. This collects Brave and Bold 87 to 122. It's 50% off, just $62.50. You can get the Invincible Iron Man Epic Collection, featuring a lot of great writers and great artists as well. This is a good, healthy dose of Gene Colan's run and Stan Lee writing. Let's see, it is 50% off. It's just $19.99. There's Green Lanterns, DC Universe Rebirth, Rage Planet from Volume 1, Sam Humphries and Ethan Van Sciver, among others. Robson Rocha is also the artist on this. It's 50% off. It's featuring the new Simon Baz and Jessica Cruz Green Lanterns and their quest. 50% off, $8.49 from InStockTrades.com. Check out all the great deals that are happening now. Don't forget, if your orders are $50 or more, you receive free shipping from our friends at InStockTrades.com. Thanks again for listening to Word Balloon. Another great episode coming to your way this week. And I will talk to you soon. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2017.